And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, welcome to David Boles Live, streaming live with you today on Twitch and Facebook and YouTube. Well, it's been an interesting 24 hours since we were last together. We received our results back from our COVID-19 test, or one of us had been in contact with someone who tested positive breakthrough for COVID-19, even though everyone wears a mask and everyone is vaccinated. A little bit of a hassle, but not terrible. The nasal swab was not the conventional nasal swab that goes all the way up there and pokes your brain. I guess they don't do that anymore. This was just a little bit here, put in a thing. 24 hours later, you get the PCR test result in a PDF file delivered to your email address with a password. And then you know what the next step is. Are you clear or not clear? We're very fortunate that we were clear. Now, the music you hear coming in and out is new. This is our new music service, slip.stream. Yes, we're enjoying it. This is acoustic blues playing beneath us. Our sound problem that we had before with the ticking appears to have resolved itself. And the streaming quality is actually very good. I like this slipstream music a lot. And you can even listen during the day from your web browser when you're not streaming. We have a commercial license, which means we can use this music anywhere online, live or recorded. I guess some of these music services, I've learned, only clear you to play their music in a live stream. That's it. But if you're a live streamer on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitch, you go back and you highlight little segments, clips from your live stream. Because people don't want to watch a 3-hour live stream. They want to watch a little 10-minute slice of what you did and then decide if they want to go back and watch your whole show. Well, it seems some of these streaming music licenses only cover you for your live stream. They don't cover the repeats, the VOD, the video on demand. That's a separate license. That's a separate issue. You might have to pay more, or maybe that service just doesn't cover it at all and you're in trouble. So if you're thinking about finding a good music streaming service, make sure you read all the fine print, because it's fine for a reason. It doesn't want to be obvious, because obvious costs you a lot of money. And you're not going to find out if you're in trouble till later when you get a DMCA complaint filed against you. And then you have to take down your video from being online, and you don't want that. You don't want to disappear your work. You work too hard for that. So slip.stream got me to thinking, I really like Slipstream as a domain name. And I have many, many, many domains that I not necessarily collect, but that I use in various different formats and divinations online. They're usually some kind of relation to my name in some way. Boleseye, BOLESEYE.com is one of my favorite. It redirects to Boles.com. But Bullseye, fabulous. How can you beat that? So I thought, on our Twitter accounts, we have our Twitch domain for this live stream. Twitch.tv/BolesBooks. Well, that's hard. People don't know what that means. You can say, hey, go to bolesbooks.org. Well, that isn't really the home page for the stream. It's the home page for our Streamlabs stream, which is the software we use to stream to you, and our merch store, and where you can donate or leave a tip. But it's not really the domain. So I smartened up a little bit, and I thought, what if we got bowls.stream, like slip.stream? Okay, looking, where can I go? How can I register that domain? Well, a lot of domains don't offer that .stream. Some do, some don't. Some do, some don't offer .tv. Some do, some don't. Some do, some don't offer .live. Some do, some don't. So I have some domains with hover.com. Used to be 2 cows. I have one domain with Google domains. And I have most of my domains with it used to be called Pernick. It's just easier if they're all in one place. But it's also good to have spread out your risk. In case something happens and your account gets compromised, you have other domains you can use to point at yourself. So I was trying to figure out, how can I register a good domain that has something to do with what we're doing here. And I realized the shorter the domain, the better, because people can remember it more easily. And .live, L-I-V-E, is shorter than .stream, S-T-R-E-A-M. S-T-R-E-A-M is 5, live 4. Okay. And then I thought, hey, wait a minute, the title of this stream is David Boles Live. So I should see if I could get Boles.live as a domain name. So I'm searching all these places that I go to get my domains, and most of them don't offer .live, but Google does. And yesterday, it seems that the .live domain registration was down for maintenance for most of the day. So I had this circle in Google Domain Circle. We're trying to register your domain. And because I'm INTJ and maybe a little bit obsessive and compulsive, every hour I go back to the page. We're trying to register your domain. So overnight, I guess it magically registered. Google did not give up on me or the domain, and they said, hey, welcome to Google Domains. You got another domain. Whoop. Boles.live. So you can set up a website, you can set up mail, all these extra things that kind of cost you a lot of money. Or I plan to do just forward it permanently to our main streaming place, which is Twitch. So I set that up and I said, well, it'll take about an hour. And it took about an hour. So I'm going to show it to you right now. Let's see if this works. We're going to be creative and type in just this, BOLES.LIVE. Now if you're old like me, you're raised on 3 domain names. .com, which is the king. You always want a .com domain. Because in a lot of browsers, you just type like BOLES and hit enter. It defaults to the .com. Then there's .net, and then there's .org. Well, now there are hundreds of different domain endings. .blog, .stream, .live, .tv, all kinds of things. So let's see what happens if the forward has propagated throughout the internet yet, which is how domain names go live. Let's see. We press enter. Here we go. See, it redirects to Twitch TV /BolesBooks, which is exactly the behavior that we are looking for. So that's wonderful news to Twitch that's working. And now we're going to listen to ourselves talk, and we don't want that, because then we get a mirror upon a mirror upon a mirror. We've done that before. So, as I told you before, because I'm slightly obsessive compulsive, and because I also maybe have a slight touch of OCD. After I saw that Boles.live went live, I thought, oh boy, hey, what are we going to do now? So I thought, well, maybe because of Slipstream, which started this whole thing, what if I'd got Boles.stream and for now just had it redirect right back to the Twitch account? But I could make it forward to YouTube or something too, if I wanted to stream. So I just did that before we went live here on David Boles Live. So let's see if that has been propagated yet across the internets. Because Google has it. It registered immediately. We didn't have to go around a circle for half a day. But it's only been registered and forwarded for about 20 minutes. Is it the magic of the internet or is it the magic of the Google? I think it's a little bit of both. Well, that's fantastic. So now I have to figure out what to do. I already changed our Twitch, our Twitter accounts. If you go to our Twitter profiles for Jana, Hardcore ASL, and for me, you will see that Boles.live is now our main domain name that will click on that and transfer you to our live stream, which is fantastic, and it's much easier to type BOLES.live and go live than to have someone type or touch twitch.tv/BOLESBOOKS. Simplify, simplify, simplify. So that's wonderful news. We're COVID negative. We are live with Boles.live and Boles.stream. I tried to register Boles.tv on Google, and it said we don't support that domain. So to me, that means it's probably hard to get or very expensive. And TV's not really happening anymore, is it, right? Not even cable. Boles.cord cutters. So now it's time for a little PSA. Do you know what a PSA is? It's a public service announcement. And it goes a little something like this. Men of the world, there's one thing that maybe you don't know that is a problem that you have. And the women are going to back me up on this, I guarantee you. And I will demonstrate it to my utter embarrassment. But that's the price we pay in being in this world together. Let's send a little inspirational quote our way, just to see what happens. Oh, there it is. The process of writing is the foundation of creation. Thank you very much. So my PSA for you today is, as you grow older as a man, you're going to have an issue with nose hair. And nose hair is very important for filtering out terrible things in the air. Not necessarily COVID, but pollution, allergens. The more hair, the better in some ways, and the more hair, the worse in many ways. Aesthetically. And as a friend of mine said, you know, the one thing I didn't know as I got older is not only that my nose hair would grow, but that my ears would start growing hair from the inside out. And it's very true. I used to have a friend who was very smart, PhD, MD, MPH, important big jobs. And he had nose hairs that would grow from his, and he was married, meaning that you have someone intimate who can say, hey, you got a little problem with your nose hair. And his nose hair was so long and stained yellow, which we don't want to know what stained it yellow, but you can probably imagine. And his nose hairs were so long, they were growing into his mustache. Okay, and then if you tracked them, and you could not help but track them and having conversation with him, they would go right to the edge of his mouth, where he obviously, with a little razor, would trim his mustache. while also trimming and combing, it appeared, his nose hairs into his mustache. Now that was very severe, and you had a feeling, well, he must know that he has a nose hair problem because he's combing them into his mustache. Sort of like the comb overs men who lose their hair get. The nose hair comb over. Hiding what? I don't know. And then, and he was working in one place, his wife was working in another, because that's what a lot of these power couples do, because they want to make a lot of money. They don't care if they live in the same town. They just want the most important possible job. So they get together infrequently, like every 3-4 months, they get together for a week and then go away. Well, the first 6 months that he was at this job and combing his nose hairs and mustache, you just wondered what was going on. And then about 6 months later, his wife visited. And then she left, went back to where she was working. Then he came back into the office. Fresh. No more nose hairs. Combed into his mustache. Got his beard trimmed up a little bit, got a haircut. Now, did he do it for his wife or before she got here? Or did his wife show up and say, "What are you doing with your nose hair? You're combing it into your mustache." Now, there are all kinds of nose hair trimmers out there, and I've tried them all. And there are mechanical ones that look like scissors, and they have a little barrel, and you... Those don't work. Don't get those. You need a nose hair trimmer like this. This is a professional nose hair trimmer. And ear trimmer. And it has a little hole, right? Where the hairs go. And you turn it on. Man, I'm going to demonstrate for you. It's not painful whatsoever. Turn it on. And you just go like this. Well, like this. And you can hear the nose hairs disappearing. Now, see, if I had nose hairs that could grow into my mustache, it would be very interesting because I don't have a mustache. I would just have a nose hair, kind of Hitler-looking thing, I guess. And I would trim it before it went into my mouth, I suppose, so I wouldn't be eating my own boogers. But this is a public service. Guys, I guarantee you, if you have a nose and you're over 40, you have hairs you got to take care of. And sometimes you see people on TV, like in the news, getting interviewed. And, you know, from the side, you can see the light hitting the nose hairs coming out of their nose. It's not a good look. You deserve better. And no one's going to tell you. Another guy's not going to say, dude, you got to take care of your nose hair. They're not going to do it because they don't care. Females tend to care because they like you to look good, in my opinion. And I'm trying not to be stereotypical because men can help men and women can help women. We all have nose hair problems. But men seem to have a worse case than women, in my limited experience. In my limited experience. And the ears, just the same. Take this off. Goes right in your ear, like this. You wouldn't think you have a lot of nose hairs in there, but you do, I mean, a lot of ear hair. But it's just there. I don't have a lot of ear hair, but it is there, and when it grows, ear hair can cause trouble. It can get into your eardrum and rest there and make scratching sounds. And it's not a lot of fun. And then what you do is you take this off, and all the stuff is here in there, as you can kind of see. And then you just, you know, kind of knock it out a little bit. That's where they go. I think you can wash this if you want to. You can do. I think this one is waterproof. So if you had it in you, you could just take it in the shower and do it privately if you don't want to clip your nose hairs. Well, since we're in the spirit of a PSA and not having any secrets from each other, I can now admit publicly that it has been a little while since I've cleaned my razor. My nose hair razor, get rid of her. Okay. But it's all there. Finely ground. Looks a little like black pepper. So if I was a different kind of person, I could have a lot of fun with that at lunch. But I won't. I'll throw it away. So men, take a look at your nose. Clean your hairs. I'm telling you. Most people won't tell you. I'm letting you know. It's a problem. And I'm reminded of my grandfather. He was a very smart man, lived in a small town. He was the pharmacist. Had a little nose hair trouble. And he did not use a nose hair trimmer. They really didn't have that. You either use scissors. Sometimes you pluck it out if you really cared. Sometimes when you're shaving with your razor, you just kind of go there and just kind of shave it off so it's, flat. And my grandfather would take a matchbook match, so it was cardboard paper, not a wooden match. And he would light the match, blow out the match, and when you blow out a match, it has a second life. It comes back as sort of a glowing amber. And so when the match would have its second life, he would hold it right here, and that ember would burn out the nose hairs in his nostril. And it smelled a little bit like burning hair, and he would have to do it twice. Second match burned, one for each nostril. But it was very successful, and it worked really, really well. So I don't recommend the match resolution if you have a nose hair problem. I do recommend the trimmer. It will help you a lot. Now we're going to have a very serious conversation about caffeine and its effect on the mind and the body. And it's very confusing, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'm with you and you're with me because we have to figure this out. And we don't know who to talk to. Because all over the news this morning, oh my gosh, you can have 4 to 6 cups of coffee, and it will prevent dementia and Alzheimer's disease. But if you go over 6 cups of coffee, then you're going to get dementia. Now, if you're like me, you know that people don't know what a cup of coffee is. Is this a cup of coffee? Is this a cup of coffee? A cup of coffee is like 8 ounces, which, in my opinion, is about half of what the average person thinks is a cup of coffee. 8 ounces is not a lot of liquid. So people are really, when they say have a cup of coffee, they're actually having 2 cups of coffee in 1 cup. So if you can have between 4 and 6 cups of coffee, which is actually not what the research is saying, but I'll show that to you in a minute. You're actually doubling the amount of coffee you're taking. So you have 2 cups of coffee, which is really 4 cups of coffee. And you think, well, so you have a couple more cups, thinking, well, that's 4, but it's not 4, it's 8. And now you have dementia. And I'm not making that up, it's all over the news. So, I did a little bit of research into this for you today, trying to figure out where do we go from here? Where do we get the right information? And this is some of the information that I found. And I am confounded by the whole thing. So this is as of yesterday. Late yesterday. How coffee and tea, that's the important thing. It's not coffee. Coffee by itself is one thing, tea by itself is one thing. Together, it's 4 to 6. And most people I know don't split their drinking. They're either tea people or they're coffee people. Now, I happen to be both. I like coffee and I like tea. But most people I know who like coffee do not like tea. So here's what the research shows us. Highlights, researchers say people who drink a moderate amount of coffee and tea per day have a lower risk of stroke and dementia. Now, moderate, we don't know what that means. We'll find out, I hope. But if you're just reading this quickly to read bullet points, my moderation is different than your moderation. Experts say this is one of a number of benefits of daily consumption of coffee or tea. They say these beverages contain flavonoids and other ingredients that can boost health. They do caution, however, that too much coffee or tea can disrupt sleep patterns due to caffeine levels as well as produce other health concerns. So here's where we get to the meat of this new study. And you're going to find out this is not really news. Like 6 months ago, I did an article for bolespells.com about caffeine and how caffeine can actually be beneficial in pushing out some of the bad, I don't want to say energy, toxins, substances from the heart, and it cleans it out and replaces it with good things. But if you drink too much caffeine, you're going to upset your tummy, and you're going to be jittery, and your eyes going to start twitching. Some people say the eye twitches from stress. I think it really twitches from too much caffeine. So, a study released today, and we'll go look at that study next, by researchers at Tianjin Medical University, says healthy individuals between the ages of 50 and 74 who drank 2 to 3 cups of coffee or 3 to 5 cups of tea per day, or a combination, this is where it's not being reported on the news, or a combination of 4 to 6 cups of both per day, had the lowest incidence of stroke and dementia among 365,000 study participants. Oh, it's our lovely friend Dora. Good morning, Dora. Hello. Me too. I usually have herbal tea in the afternoon. I love tea. And I try to really stay away from caffeine, and then I was told, well, you need a little bit of caffeine, especially if you have high blood pressure and you have a heart condition. I don't have a heart condition, I have blood pressure. So I try to stay away from caffeine, and then I find out my cardiologist drinks espresso endlessly throughout the day. So who do you believe? That's the problem. But we're not there yet. We're on our way to the problem, but we're not at the problem yet. So researchers looked at people from the UK Biobank who were recruited between 2006 and 2010 and followed until 2020, which is good. That's a good long study. However, subjects self-reported their coffee and tea intake. And if you know anything about human nature, people do not over-report what they drink and eat. They under-report what they drink and eat. So anything they say, I would double it. And those who drank the higher amounts of coffee or tea had a 32% lower risk of a stroke. Okay, we like that. And a 28% lower risk of dementia compared with those who drank neither. So now they're saying you gotta have coffee and tea. Now you remember a while back where all these doctors and researchers said 1 glass of red wine a day is great for your heart. Oh boy, everyone said, hey, we're free, we don't have an excuse to drink. And if 1 glass of red wine is good for my heart, 3 glasses are even better. And then people kind of stopped and asked questions. They found out that the whole research was funded by the wine industry. You can't trust anybody. Not even me. I'm just showing you what I know, but I don't know anything, so that's the problem. We have to keep that in mind. Dora only has 2 cups of coffee a day. That's admirable. Most people I know have a hard time regulating their coffee. I now have nose hairs in my throat. But I agree that it's better to have a couple cups of coffee and then the rest of the day drink tea. And green tea is really fantastic, but green tea can have caffeine in it, so you have to be very careful in what you're enjoying. Can't beat water. Water is wonderful. And you know there are some people who just won't drink water. They don't like the taste of water. I don't think that water has a taste. Now you can add flavor to it. You get some deliciousness into your body. I love water. My mother-in-law did not like water. She liked Mountain Dew. So she would drink Mountain Dew all day. And we get most of our bodily water needs from our food, not actually our water, but water's delicious. My wife does not like water, but she will drink it because she knows it's good for her. The study also found intake of coffee alone, or in combination with tea, was associated with lower risk of post-stroke dementia. It doesn't say anything about tea by itself. It says coffee alone or a little bit of tea with your coffee. Now, is this all funded by the coffee industry? I don't know. We don't know yet. I'm sure someone's trying to figure this out. Then it goes on, the benefits of coffee and tea, phytonutrients, some words of caution. I like that this is New Jersey. Michelle Rausch, a registered dietitian for the Actors Fund home in Englewood, New Jersey, told Healthline that coffee has been associated with other health benefits, such as reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's disease, certain cancers, and cirrhosis. However, there's also a downside. Now, the downside is not part of any of these points. The downside is below the fold, as they say. You have to keep reading to find out the downside. People don't want to know the downside. There are some cons to drinking coffee and tea when done excessively, Roush said. Tea and coffee contain compounds called tannins, which can interfere with iron absorption if taken in excess. These tannins can also cause staining to teeth when they build up on the enamel. And the caffeine and what people do and add to coffee and tea can be problematic. That's very, very true. If you're going to drink coffee, you have to drink black coffee. You can't add sugar, you can't add agave, you can't add honey. I guess that's mostly tea. We add soy milk to our coffee, but never sugar. We add a little Creapure, which is micronized creatine that is invented by people and doesn't come from animals, which is very good for building your muscles and keeping your muscles in shape. Like coffee, the caffeine in tea can also cause an issue if taken in excess, leading to restlessness, shakiness, twitchy eye, rapid heart rate, insomnia, and even anxiety. The catechins in tea may interfere with some heart and blood pressure medications. Now that's new to me. The health benefits from tea and coffee may be negated if sugar, honey, cream, and other caloric or fat-laden ingredients are added. Yeah, be careful of non-dairy creamers. They're packed with fat and have a lot of calories. And you will be shocked if you read the label on a non-dairy creamer. Shocked. So this is what's been in the news this morning. And after we take our blood pressure break, I'm going to come back and show you what Paul Harvey used to call the rest of the story. Back momentarily. And we're back. Well, you know you're in trouble when you take a break and you come back and you find your beautiful wife has corrected you, for the record. So because she's the beautiful Jana Marie, I'm going to type back to her. Hello, JM. I know you love sparkle water. That's like Perrier. Or bubble water, as we call it, because we're from the Midwest. Do you enjoy flat water? And Nebraska, by the way, is Oto, Indian language, for flat water. Do you enjoy flat water by choice or need? And we'll see if she's still there, if she's still following us. She might reply, she might not reply. She might be done with us. She might have just left the chat in a fury. I don't know. I do have a little ground bell pepper I could offer her for lunch. More ground pepper, ma'am. But probably not. Oh. 3 to 4 liters a day. That's a lot of water. I love a lot of water. I don't think that's a bad thing. Well, Janet Book has gone into hiding, I guess. She'll pop in when she's ready. Now we have to go back to our conversation about caffeine, which is confusing us. Yes, Dora. Now, it's very interesting what you say about water. Now, I can drink plain flat water all day. I do prefer the bubble water. Perrier is my favorite. There are others that I have written about and explored. Perrier is not my favorite. Pellegrino is my absolute favorite. And I read somewhere recently that when you add, like the Crystal Light drops or the other drops that you flavor in your water, if you're trying to lose weight or you want to be healthy, what those drops do, because they're sort of artificial intelligence, artificial flavoring, is they make you more hungry. Because the taste and the flavor and the little bit of sugar or fake sugar that's in there triggers your body to say, ow, this isn't water, this is dessert. Now I'm ready to eat, I'm hungry. Oh, there's Jana Marie right back. Jana Marie will take all kinds of water. She does not discriminate against water now. She will take it. Jana Marie used to be a big Pepsi drinker. This is not a secret. And we're off all soda. But we don't call it soda because we're from the Midwest. We call it pop. And if you try to go in New York City and say, I'd like a large pop, people look at you. What is wrong with you? Who are you? Where did you come from? That's what my father says it. He's from the Midwest. So in New York City, if you're a tourist, don't ask for pop because you're going to immediately be known that you're not from around here. Call it soda. Or call it soda pop. But not pop. If you're in Iowa and Nebraska, you say pop, I like a pop, they know what you mean. Nowhere else, really. Dora likes Crystal Light. So do I. I have Crystal Light right over here. I put the drops in. I like the drops better. I think it's banana strawberry. And it's very delicious. But my best friend Jana Marie will not add that to her water because for her, it makes her body hungry. It makes her more hungry when she's trying to not eat because it tastes so delicious. So it's a curse. Everything in life is a curse. Pretty much. So this is the story that everyone's talking about today, how coffee tea and lower risk of stroke and dementia. Wonderful. Isn't that great news? Let's lead the news with it. So this is that heavy story that article references It's open access. It is peer-reviewed. We don't know what Janet is saying correct about. Can you be more specific, my love? Correct about what? I have to answer now. Correct me, yes. Make it all about me. So this is the abstract. This is the methods and finding. Oh, yes. Thank you, Jan Marie. The methods and findings, I mean, you can read this, but it's very, very deep. We're not going to do that. We're going to read the conclusion, like our students do. So the conclusion of this big story is we found that Jan Marie gets hungry. If adding anything to water, yes. It's very true. However, when we have the bubble water, that tends to fill you up and make you not hungry. So we're doing intermittent fasting. So we're on this crazy schedule now. Sometimes on the weekends we go for 3 days, but normally every single day now we have an eating window. And our eating window is 6 hours, from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. The rest of the day and night, we are not eating. We're drinking water, having a little tea, maybe. Coffee if you have to, but nothing in it has to be black. Because it cleans us out, cleans our bodies out, inside, kidneys, brain. Makes us feel good, strong. And then you have a 6-hour eating window. So some people just go crazy and eat a lot, but we try to stay under 1,500 calories. And having some bubble water helps fill that void as your body is getting used to these new eating terms. So the conclusion of this heavy story that was being reported everywhere today is we found that drinking coffee and tea separately or in combination were associated with lower risk of stroke and dementia. Intake of coffee alone or in combination with tea was associated with lower risk of post-stroke dementia. So what did the researchers do and find? This is very interesting as well. Bullet points again. We found that coffee intake of 2 to 3 cups or tea, 3 to 5 cups of tea, a combination, linked with the lowest hazard ratio of incident of stroke and dementia. Now, this is not just about dementia, this is also about stroke. But in the news today, they're not talking about stroke whatsoever. Why? Because people don't want to talk about it and because it's complicated. So drinking 2 to 3 cups of coffee with 2 to 3 cups of tea daily were associated with, this is the first time you're seeing them, a 32% lower risk of stroke and a 28% lower risk of dementia. Now you think that stroke would lead the news. 32% lower risk if you drink tea and coffee. That's pretty darn good. Intake of coffee alone or in combination with tea was associated with lower risk of post-stroke dementia. So again, this is confirming that tea by itself is not going to help you. Coffee is it. And if you want a little more punch, then you add the tea. So that's the heavy-duty study. Now we keep searching and we keep looking. Now this is from 2010. So this is around the time that that other study that we just read about is beginning. And here's what we thought back then. Caffeine as a protective factor in dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Now, wait a minute. Doesn't that sound like exactly what we just finished reading about? So did this new study just confirm this old study? Well, that's sort of what it looks like. And this is a very short, because they want you to pay for the article. But here's the heart of it. For tea drinking, protective effects against cognitive decline and dementia are also less evident. In the CADE study, coffee drinking of 3 to 5 cups per day at midlife, okay, we just heard about that. It sounds exactly like the same study. Was associated with a decreased risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease, AD, by about 65% at late life. Now that's big. In conclusion, coffee drinking may be associated with a decreased risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. This may be mediated by caffeine and or other mechanisms like antioxidant capacity and increased insulin sensitivity. This finding might open possibilities for prevention of postponing the onset of dementia in AD. So that's big, huge news. 2010. So we keep pushing, we keep looking for answers. Do we believe the old study? Do we believe the new study? Is it T? Is it 65%? Is it 32%? A little confusing. So we go to Harvard Health. This was just published November 1st, 2 weeks ago. This year, the leading headline, Harvard Medical School. Too much coffee may risk dementia. So they're attacking this from the other end. Not that, coffees will prevent dementia. They're taking the attack that you've already had too much coffee and now you're going to have dementia. Now, how does that help? It's a conflicting headline. How coffee and tea can help lower risk of stroke dementia from Healthline. Harvard, too much coffee may risk dementia risk. What's a person supposed to do? Who do you believe? Do you believe Harvard or do you believe the study that cheats you on? In the journals, drinking coffee can provide a much needed mental jolt, but new research suggests that you should stop at 5 or 6 cups per day. Drinking more than that could harm your brain. Okay, we know that. But why are you taking the negative approach, Harvard? Why aren't you taking the opposite approach? Just to be antithetical? To create your own headline from the exact same story? It's a little suspicious to me. Researchers looked at about 400,000 people. We know it was 62,000, not 400,000, who regularly drank coffee, either caffeinated or decaffeinated. Now, that's the first time we've heard about decaf can be the same as caffeine. That doesn't really make sense to me. Is it about caffeine or is it about the coffee bean? Daily intake was divided into several categories, from 1 to 2 cups to more than 6 cups. And remember, the cups analysis, I guarantee you, is not being reported correctly because people do not know how large a cup of coffee is. Approximately 18,000 people had their brain volume measured with an MRI. At the 11-year follow-up, the investigators found that compared with light coffee drinkers, 1 to 2 daily cups, heavy coffee drinkers, more than 6 cups per day, tended to have smaller amounts of total brain volume, especially in the hippocampus, the reason responsible for short and long-term memory. So Harvard is now telling us, well, if you don't drink enough coffee, and if you drink too much coffee, your brain's going to shrink. Have we heard anything about that until we just read it here? Heavy drinkers, going in a whole new direction, also had a 53% higher risk of being diagnosed with dementia compared with light drinkers. I think they're talking about coffee and not alcohol. At least that's the context of this, but who knows? The risk was approximately the same whether people drank caffeinated or decaffeinated coffee. Okay. I just wish they would have clarified that to the heavy drinkers of coffee. People don't read whole sentences. It's unknown how coffee may affect the brain in this way. The researchers pointed out that high amounts of caffeine, a molecule in coffee that can increase cholesterol, could be a contributor. The findings don't suggest that coffee lovers give up their daily Java. But many people may want to be mindful of their number of refills, especially when you have a great big coffee mug. The results were published online June 24, 2021 by Nutritional Neuroscience. So there you have it. Too much, not enough. Dementia, not dementia. It all depends where you get your news from. And isn't that the truth? Some news stations are there to help you. Newspapers, magazines give you the good news. Others want to scare you and put you in fear and tell you that you're dying, when we all already know we're already dying. It's a very difficult situation to be put in as a regular human being, trying to figure out, well, I've had one cup of coffee, but can I have another? And how many catechins do I have? And what's my cholesterol level? And my eyes twitching, is it because of anxiety or because I don't know if I should have another cup of coffee? And I've tried it both ways. I've tried being completely caffeine-free, and so has Jenna Marie. And in about 2 to 3 days, you have a little bit of a headache. And then you're all fine. And you feel good, really. I prefer myself not being on caffeine. But then you talk to some doctors, some of these things come out. And, well, you have the age, post-life, where you're going to have dementia, and your brain is going to be smaller, and we're not going to run an MRI on you, but because of your age and because you're not drinking enough coffee, we already know you have a small brain. You can get a bigger brain if you drink more caffeine in your coffee. It's a very confusing state of being. And then you find out your heart doctor says drink coffee, and then you say, well, coffee beans can help beat back diabetes. Okay, I'll have some coffee. And then you drink too much coffee, and there's acid, and it hurts your stomach, and then you look for an instant coffee, which I have, by the way. We'll talk about kinds of coffee to drink. And substitutes, there are a lot of substitutes out there that are very good if you're trying to stay away from caffeine, but now all the research seems to say, well, you need to have a little bit of caffeine. Or maybe they're saying it's not the caffeine or the decaf, it's just having the bean itself. It's all just a little scary because you just don't know who to believe. And that's why you have some people today who just turn off. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to do my own thing. And that's dangerous too, because people are just making it up. Well, who needs a vaccine? I have this horse thing that I'm going to rub on myself, and that's going to protect me. That's the effect when you get all of these different points of view on what should be a thing. How many cups of coffee should I have? Yes or no? Up or down? Well, it depends how old you are, how many cups of coffee you've had. If you're having tea, don't have tea just by itself. Now, before tea, you couldn't beat. Tea was long life. Green tea, you drank that 4 to 5 cups a day, you were good. Now it says if you drink tea by yourself, no one's gonna help you. It doesn't help you at all, unless you add a little bit of coffee to it. So I guess we have to be careful out there and just try to do everything in moderation and not go too crazy. Because there are people out there who live to scare you. Scaring people makes you a lot of money. Whereas helping people, being honest with people, doesn't always get you to the end game. Well, it's time we take one more little blood pressure break. Then we're going to come back and go in a totally different direction. But are we? With the Columbia riots of 1968. That is coming up next. I will see you in one moment. from break. Thank you for being here on David Boles Live. We have a new domain name. You can visit us. Just type in BOLES.LIVE in any web browser and hit return, and it will resolve to our Twitch streaming page, which is always quite delightful. So one thing, just finally, about caffeine. When you go off caffeine, strictly for about, let's say, 6 months, and then for whatever reason you decide, because maybe you want to avoid dementia or a stroke, you decide to go back on caffeine via coffee, and after about 20 minutes of taking your first sip or two, you get this. Mwah. And it wakes you up. And you think, oh, that I've missed for 6 months. That's... I'm awake now. For 6 months I felt good, very neutral, but not neutral anymore. Now I'm up. Wow. It's a little scary when you think about it, because boy, oh boy, that really wakes you up. It makes a difference in your life. So now we turn to a really fascinating topic that has fascinated me for many years, for many different reasons, which I'll share with you now, and that is the Columbia riots of 1968. What? Columbia? Riots? All those liberal wackos? Oh yes. A dirty and filthy history with those wackos trying to stand up for what's right. But to understand what happened in 1968, in April of 1968, on the Morningside campus of Columbia University in the city of New York, we first have to leap back in time just a little bit to shape some context of what was going on in the world in 1968. Because reality is not separated from the happenstance. So this is a rundown of 1968 from Smithsonian Magazine. The year that shattered America. And I'm going to tell you right now, we are very close in 2021-22. 6 years away from the 60th anniversary of the year, the shattered year of 1968. And I'm going to propose today that what happened in 1968 will be happening again soon across the world, and especially in the United States, if this rush to authoritarianism continues. So we're going back to 68 to understand 2028. It isn't here yet, but it's here. So this was written in 2018, 50 years after 1968. And in 2018, the nation is still reckoning with the changes that came in that fateful year. And we're not over it. There are people who are longingly looking at 1968 and saying, they didn't get it right then, the authoritarians. But maybe we'll learn from our mistakes and do it better this time. So here we are, January 15th. We're not going to go through every single day, but we're going to take a look at this because it sets the scene and creates context for the contrast. The war in Vietnam was raging. Kids, students, were refusing to serve. They were fleeing to Canada. And poor kids were doing the fighting on the ground. The war in Vietnam and social crisis at home. At age 87, Jeanette Rankin, who was a congressional woman from Montana, voted against U.S. participation in both world wars. Leads some 5,000 women on a march in Washington, D.C. to protest the Vietnam War in January of '68. The event highlights the generational, political, and class differences among the marchers, okay? We march for the same reasons today that we marched back then, but the context is different, but the intention is the same. And it gives a growing women's movement a motto: sisterhood is powerful. Did we have the Pink Ladies marching on Washington not too long ago? January 20, Game of the Century, basketball, okay. Rona Martin's Laugh-In debuts. 6 seasons sets a standard for sketch comedy. Unmatched until NBC Saturday Night Live launches in '75. We're still in January. North Korea seizes the USS Pueblo. And they still have it, and they show it off to you in North Korea, claiming the surveillance ship straight into its waters. 1 U.S. crewman is killed. 82 others are imprisoned in an 11-month standoff with the United States. 50 years later, North Korea still uses the USS Pueblo to try to condemn us and to build up the strength of their military. It's the one military victory they believe they have against the United States. January 30, you're seeing a lot of guns in this year. North Vietnamese communists launched the Tet Offensive. Very important offensive. The assault contradicts the Johnson administration, USA, claims that the communist forces are weak, and the U.S.-backed South is winning the war. February 1st, more guns. I Am a Man. Memphis sanitation workers, Echo Cole and Robert Walker, are crushed to death by a malfunctioning garbage truck. Their deaths lead to a strike that becomes a civil rights movement. Okay? February. Again, more guns. Battle for the Vietnamese village of Ben Tre. American officer tells Associated Press reporter it became necessary to destroy the town in order to save it. Have we heard that before? The quotation printed in newspapers nationwide became a catchphrase for opponents of the Vietnam War. February 8th, South Carolina State Campus police opened fire. Police opened fire on students protesting segregation at Orangeburg's only bowling alley. 3 protesters died, 27 more are wounded in 1968. 9 officers are tried and acquitted of charges related to the use of force. A protest coordinator is convicted of inciting to riot, served 7 months in prison, and is pardoned 25 years later. February 1968, Walter Cronkite, in a CBS TV special, says the U.S. war effort is mired in a stalemate and amplifies public skepticism of the war. So that was a big turning point. I was 3 years old in 1968, but I can tell you I know that was a turning point when Uncle Walt on the CBS Evening News turned against the war in Vietnam. The people in D.C. said, well, that's it, we're over. When Uncle Walt is against us, we can't win. February of '68, the report of the Kerner Commission appointed by President Johnson to examine the cause of race riots in American cities previous years declares the nation is moving toward 2 societies. One black, one white, separate and unequal. And how far have we come since 1968? I don't think we've come very far at all. You can take that quote from February 29th, 1968, and read it on the news today right now, and people nod their head and say, oh yes, very serious. Brand new problem, I gotta fix this. Race in America. The first week of March 1968, 15,000 Latino high school students in Los Angeles walk out of classes because they want a better education. Race, conflict, money, power, poor people. It's bubbling in 1968, and it's bubbling still in 2021. And just look where we're going in America with this authoritarianism and how some people want a king in America and how states are trying to overturn elections and prevent future election results by saying we don't like the vote, so we're going to throw that out and we're going to decide who we want to be president or representative. We're going to redraw these districts so we can have the people we want in power. And we can do that because we have the power. You don't have the power yet. You might have it in the future, but right now you're not getting it. The future becomes the past. March 5, Czechoslovakia abolishes censorship. March 6, 500 New York University students picket a university-sponsored recruiting event for Dow Chemical, the principal manufacturer of napalm. And napalm was a sort of gel-like gas that Americans were dropping on the Vietnamese people, and the bomb would explode, and this gel-like gasoline would stick to them and catch fire from the explosion and burn them alive. On March 12, Richard Nixon, in 1968, wins 78% of the vote in New Hampshire's GOP primary. Eugene McCarthy, Minnesota's anti-war senator, takes a shocking 42% of the Democrat vote. March 13, there's oil in Alaska, in Prudhoe Bay. March 16, New York Senator Robert Kennedy enters the race for the Democrat presidential nomination, saying McCarthy's showing in New Hampshire has proven how deep are the present divisions within our party and our country. It is now unmistakably clear that we can change these disastrous, divisive policies only by changing the men who make them. You could say the same thing today, and maybe it's on the other side, and maybe with a different effect. Well, I'm the only person who can win. We all have to get behind this guy because he can only beat that guy. Exact same story, different year. In March of 1968, hundreds of students take over the administration building of Howard University in Washington, D.C., seeking a greater voice in student discipline in the curriculum. Now, these takeovers that were very popular in 1968, in the years that came afterward, were put down very quickly. And it was very dangerous if you wanted to be a student and take over campus buildings, because the authorities did not want to mess with that. March 31st, as war pressure mounts, President Johnson announces he's not running for re-election, which was very interesting. On April 3rd, 1,000 men returned their draft cards to government offices all over the country. April 4, Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis for the sanitation workers' strike. Whoops. Is fatally shot on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. Gunman James Earl Ray, a white supremacist, flees the country. Over the next week, riots in more than 100 cities nationwide leave 39 dead and more than 26 injured and 21,000 arrested. 1968. The world is on fire and America is in the middle of burning. April 6, 90-minute shootout between Black Panthers and police in Oakland, California. Police shoot Bobby Hunton, 17, as he tries to surrender. April 11, President Johnson signs the Fair Housing Act, banning discrimination in housing on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin. It is the last of the landmark civil rights laws that he signed. And that is still very powerful and in effect today. April 23. This is the point of our conversation. Students take over 5 buildings in Columbia University's main campus and briefly hold a dean of the school hostage, calling for the university to cut its ties to military research. Before dawn on April 30, administrators call in the police, who respond with 1,000 officers. 1,000 officers storming the Columbia University campus. More than 700 people are arrested and 132 students, 4 faculty, and 12 officers are injured. So we're going back to that, but let's continue with the year quickly. April 29, the Broadway musical Hair opens. On May 6, another riot breaks out between police and 5,000 university students in Paris. In May, there are peace talks about Vietnam. May 27, Supreme Court rules 7-1, burning a draft card is not an act of free speech protected by the First Amendment. Andy Warhol in June is shot and critically wounded in his New York City loft by Valerie Solanas, apparently for losing a copy of a play she'd written. She pleads guilty to assault and spends 3 years in prison. June 4. Bobby Kennedy is gaining momentum in his presidential campaign. Wins the California primary and is then assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. So in 1968, you lose Martin Luther King and you lose Bobby Kennedy in the same year. In June, James Earl Ray is arrested in London and pleads guilty to murdering King. And July 1st, Johnson signs the Treaty of Non-Proliferation Agreement for Nuclear Weapons. In July of 1968, Intel is born. Intel Inside. 50, 60 years ago. Special Olympics begins. In Cleveland, we have shootouts between police and black militants. Nixon is renominated for president in July. In August, we have the first African-American Marine to receive the Medal of Honor. Hey Jude is released. In August, at the DNC in Chicago, police and Illinois guardsmen go on a rampage, clubbing and tear-gassing hundreds of anti-war demonstrators. That's where Dan Rather got his start, by getting beat up on the floor of the convention. In September, feminists are protesting Miss America. In September, Arthur Ashe wins the U.S. Open, becoming the first black man to win a Grand Slam. Also in September, Nixon, seeking to disability sourpuss image appears on Laugh-In to make fun of himself, which was very effective. In September, 60 Minutes debuts. Boeing rolls out the 747. It's a big year of change. In Mexico City, police stop a student-led protest. In October, Apollo 7 makes the first live broadcast from space. October 16, Black Power. The Olympic Games in Mexico City raise their gloved fists in the national anthem to protest violence and poverty among African Americans. It's a very powerful image 50 years later. In October, President Johnson stops bombing Vietnam. In November, Nixon wins the presidency. And Shirley Chisholm becomes the first black woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In November, Yale, after 267 years, decides to admit its first female undergraduate. Beginning in 69, even though it was 68. In November, the Supreme Court unanimously rules that an Arkansas law prohibiting the teaching of evolution in public schools violates the First Amendment. In November 1968, O.J. Simpson wins the Heisman Trophy. And we know what happened after that. In December, Elvis Presley begins a comeback with his NBC TV special. In the final week of December, Apollo 8 becomes the first manned spacecraft to orbit the moon and return safely to Earth. December 23, North Korea releases the Pueblo crew, right? But keeps the ship. It's now an exhibit in the Victorious Fatherland Liberation War Museum in Pyongyang. So that's 1968. What a year. The world exploded and started burning. And the fires have not yet stopped. And now we're going to take our final blood pressure break. And we're going to come back and round this out with what really happened and why at Columbia University in 1968. Back very fast. Thank you so much. And we are back from break. Thank you so much for being here on David Boles Live. We have 2 new domain names that go right to this live stream on Twitch. Boles, B-O-L-E-S .stream, S-T-R-E-A-M, or B-O-L-E-S .L-I-V-E. Love to see you there. Glad to have you with us. It's the easy way to get there, is what I mean. If you forget the twitch.tv/BOLES books, blah, 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 blah. Very confusing. So now we've set the stage for what's going on in the world in 1968. Now we're going to focus down on what happened on the Columbia campus in 1968 in April. And it's shocking for this reason. Columbia University in the city of New York is old money. What does that mean? Well, there are 2 major universities in New York City, Manhattan, private universities. One of them is Columbia, founded in 1752, and the other is New York University. New York University, the saying goes, is new money. Columbia University is old money. Old money means generational money, inherited money, trust fund money. Sort of conservative. New money means not necessarily generational. Trust fund, yes. But the money is newer, flashier. And if you want to try to catch up with old money, new money has to spend a lot of money. And that's kind of true. You find things going on with students who apply to both universities, and Columbia tends to not offer as much financial aid assistance, whereas NYU, if they really want you, tends to really throw money at you. Because if you're talented and you're interesting, they are interested in bringing you to NYU instead of having you go to Columbia. And they do that by, not reputation over the years, but by giving you a lot of money. So there's a financial incentive in new money that is not there in old money. Old money doesn't speak. Old money is old money. We're going to be fine just the way we are. So the fact that this riot broke out in 1968 over a racial issue in old money Columbia was very shocking. So I'll show you some articles, and here's one that I wrote a while back. 2015, the 1968 Columbia University riots. And I was able to purchase these images in this article. So I have the full, big, beautiful, original image that is scanned, front side, back side. And they're just fascinating and alarming. As I say in my article, some ghosts never die. They remain haunting you forever, not from the shadows, but from the bright sunlight of College Walk. And in 1932, there was also another student strike that took over the campus. I wrote an article on that as well. So that's kind of the history of, liberal campuses. New money, old money. And the riot in 1968 really focused on athletics, where black students were not allowed to use the new gymnasium. So here's the first image. Hamilton Hall. Yes, that Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton. And the kids took over the building. Campus life in and out. They were protesting against racial discrimination and Columbia's role in Vietnam. One of the 1,000 police officers who were sent in to quell this uprising of students who were interested in equality and not killing people. Food was brought in. A militant minority of collegians successful in forcing the suspension of classes and construction of an $11.5 million gymnasium. It was strong enough to win amnesty for those participating in the seizure of 5 campus buildings. People got married during this sit-in. It was a big happening on campus. And this is how it started to fall apart. Right outside of Hamilton Hall again. Evicting 500 rebellious students. Protesting university policy. This is Columbia University President Grayson Kirk meeting with the students. Now, isn't that a picture? That's a wonderful photograph, isn't it? Is he vomiting in his mouth, or is he hiding his nose hairs? Only Grayson Kirk knows. Then, after the police were sent in, the riot and the takeover started all over again. And the kids said, well, you got rid of 500 of us in Hamilton Hall? Well, you didn't do it the right way. So they had a sit-down strike. Why are you sending the police in here to get rid of us? But, you know, if they did it today, the police would be in there with tear gas and billy clubs and guns, I bet. In an attempt to form a human barricade around Columbia, rebel students and sympathizers assembled along the perimeter of campus on April 30th. Right outside the main gate, Columbia. Right there says journalism. That's the journalism school. That's Dodge Hall right here in the back. And then Columbia University owned a lot of buildings in the area that they either wanted to tear down or make into dorms. But at that time in '68, real people were living in them, and they were tenements. And like, Columbia has all this money, can't they fix it up before they get rid of the people and at least let them live in a nice place? And after it's all over, there's the police, and there's the person who's sent in to clean it all up. The students didn't clean up the mess. The maintenance people cleaned up the mess. And then the law students picketed in May because they were upset. And the students then took over the tenement houses to protest even more. This is in May. April, May. This is going on and on. Columbia is getting very upset that this protest is not ending. A demonstrator is hustled away by plainclothes detectives after police flushed 150 rebel students from a barricade at Columbia University, forcibly cleaning out 2,000 students who milled about, angrily denouncing the initial police action. These are the quotes on the back of the images that I'm sharing with you. There's the president again, old money, state suit. Perfect black glasses. 1,500 students in graduation in June. Still demonstrating. In September of that year, still protesting, telling new students, you don't know what you're getting in. You don't know what you're in for at Columbia. We're going to tell you. Stay away if you aren't with us. And it goes on. September of that year, students grab the nightstick of a university officer. More fighting. It was such a big mess. Here's my article on the Columbia Strike of 1932, which is very interesting as well. But we won't deal with that one today. So that's my version of what happened with the Columbia riots in 1916. Now, this is how the mainstream press reported it. In 2008, reflecting back, Columbia University's campus was eerie that night. Japanese music drifted from Fairweather Hall, one of the occupied buildings, and a sitar played ancient peace. Into the cold darkness, protesters moved furtively in the shadows. And down the quadrangle, hundreds of police officers formed a skirmish line. Tensions had been building for a week over a protest against what thousands of students and even many faculty members regarded as racism and militarism by Columbia. 5 campus buildings were seized by radical students. The dean had been taken hostage briefly, and the university was shut down. This is how Columbia itself deals with its own nasty history of 1968. Personally recalling the takeover. Now this is, as you can tell, not on a new page at Columbia University. This is an old page that they just happen to still have online, but at least they're kind of owning up to what happened. Columbia College Day, spring of 68, 6 weeks that shook Morningside. It was a little longer than 6 weeks. Here's some color photos of what happened outside the library. And it was not a peaceful event. There were people that were hurt. Police, 1,000 police called in. Beat up the kids. They have all kinds of money. They're old money. Teach them a lesson. Grateful Dead played. Fascinating history. And then, how we bring this kind of around in a full circle is, when I was at Columbia University as a student in 1988, I was in the theater program, and I was on a presidential scholarship, and Howard Stein brought me to Columbia from Nebraska. We were in D.C. briefly for about 8 months, and then we moved on up to New York. And when we were visiting the campus in 1987 with Jana Marie, who was not yet my beautiful wife, but would be a few months after that, we stayed with one of the Columbia University students. And as I was soon to learn, but it was reinforced that day, that the theater program had directors of playwrights, but no actors. They do now, but back then they didn't. So as part of the weekly performance, where a director would direct something by a playwright, they were always desperate to find actors. And New York had a lot of actors, but to get all the way up to Columbia and then to go all the way back down to Times Square, it took you a while. It took you, 45 minutes. Plus you had to pay the subway. So if you were innovative and you were a desperate director or a playwright, you would cover the subway fares for your actors. But what they preferred to do is just use people in class. But directors were not allowed to appear in something they were directing, which was the easy way to get around the requirement of having to put on a show every week, a little scene. But that was strictly enforced. You were absolutely not allowed, as a director, to appear in something you were directing. But you could appear in something that your co-director friend was directing, even though you were a director, because you were not directing it. So the friend we were staying with was a playwright, and she had a scene coming up, and they needed an actor. And I said, hey, why don't you use the lovely Jana Marie? She's deaf, but you could make that part of the scene. And the playwright said, oh. And I said, And so they rehearsed it. Jana was willing to do it. We were up there 2 or 3 days visiting, and we went into the director's lab, little black box theater in Dodge Hall. And Jana performed in her scene, and she was very lovely. I watched her, for the first and only time, I believe, kiss a strange man as part of the scene, so it was acting. Not real, right? And it was wonderful. Interesting. He spoke, she signed, they were in love, end of scene. Great. Well, that class was taught by George Ferenz. And he was a very interesting, different sort of director. And when I told Howard the next day, Howard Stein, when I went to meet him, I said, hey, we were in this little scene and Jana acted and it was George Friends' class, and Howard like, what? You guys were, Jenna was, what? And explain what happened. He said, oh my gosh, I wish I could have been there. It was a night class. And Howard said, well, you know that George is a very interesting person. And I said, yeah? And he said, yeah. He does a lot of work at La Mama. And he had just, I think, started teaching at Columbia at that time. And he said, but he really came to prominence in the artistic New York world in the 80s when George decided to restage the 1968 Columbia riots on campus. And I said, what riots in 1968? And Howard was like, now I know. And George did not ask permission to do this. George Ferenz was a wild and innovative guy. And he got a lot of actors, dressed a lot of them up as policemen. The others were students. And he had this kind of big scene on college campus, on the green, with the student protesters and the police rushing in to beat up the kids. And there was a big riot. And that's what theater should be about. Unannounced, vicious, daring, interesting. And he became famous for it. It was in the newspaper. People were upset by it. How dare he recreate the riot of 1968 on our campus? But it was an event. And, I'm sorry to say, George Ferenz recently died in September. Died at 74, innovative theater director. And one thing that was great about George, because the next year I was in his class with these directors who would direct our scenes, and George would give feedback. And one of the most interesting things he would have you do, he would work, you do the scene and get feedback, and then he would, work with the director and give feedback to the playwright, and then he would sometimes work with the actor saying, you missed this because it really meant this, so do it again. And one of his favorite exercises was to tell an actor, there's a cockroach on the floor right in front of you. Kill it. So the actor would take their foot and stomp on the cockroach, especially in New York City. And George, who always had a big hat on and a leather jacket, would say, it's still alive. You didn't kill the cockroach. So the actor would, look down again and say, blah, blah, blah. There's no cockroach, by the way. It's all imagination. So they could, really kill the cockroach. And the actor would be very pleased. I was seeing I killed the cockroach. And George would adjust his hat and say, you didn't kill the cockroach. It's still alive. And the actor would get really upset. And the actor would grind his foot into the floor and punch the floor and take a chair and throw it on the ground, take a book and throw it on the ground. And a lot of actors would say, the cockroach is dead. And George would look back and say, that was the energy and the intention that you needed in that scene. And the actor would be aghast, like, what? And George would say, that focused, determined fury, that controlled viciousness is what that scene needed, and you didn't do it. But you have a cockroach in front of you who refuses to die, then we see it. Why? And every actor had a different reason and a different explanation, and it was invaluable in learning how to communicate with actors and playwrights and directors, because intention matters. And when you're a director and a playwright and you're sitting back watching the scene, it's not in your hands anymore. It's in the hands and the feet and the mind and the hands of the actor. Now, the other thing about George is he was a really great guy, lots of stories, had a lot of experience, and because he was an adjunct, he taught a lot of different places. He ended up teaching at Columbia, I believe, for 15 years. He had just sort of started when I was there. And he also said that he taught at Yale. He had been recently hired at Yale, and he had a very strict routine where he would take the train, get off the train, go to this certain pub where he would have a hamburger and one glass of beer. And then he would go teach class, and we would be done. But the delight in his eyes when he said why he was so happy to teach at Yale. Now, that's a competitor with Columbia. The Yale School of Drama, Columbia, that's an old program where Howard Stein came from. And Columbia was new in theater. Oscar Hammerstein second for theater studies in the city of New York. And he would say that teaching at Yale meant that he could get his teeth fixed. So he would time his dental work, because I guess he had a lot of trouble with his teeth, where he would go to New Haven and get his teeth worked on, and then go to the pub and have his burger and beer, and then go teach class. And he said he felt so lucky and so fortunate as an adjunct. That's our life. That's the life of an adjunct. No health insurance, no job security. We pay you a little bit. You're not promised you're going to teach after this semester. You just teach as you go. But he said, I have a window in this semester where I have full dental, and I'm going to get all my teeth work done. And that, for me, was my experience of crushing the cockroach. Stomping on it till he can't stomp on it anymore. That if you're going to try to be in theater, and if you're going to try to survive and have intention, you better learn how to attack that cockroach and take advantage of every moment you have, because who knows if you'll be teaching again, and who knows if you can get your tooth fixed next semester. You better do it this semester. So this is the New York Times obituary for George Ferenc. And the fact that he gets an article and a photograph tells you quite a lot. The theater director George Ferenc in 1982. I look at the theater as a hammer. Aggressively and highly theatrical. Something you can't get by flicking on the television switch, he said. It's got to have spectacle, plot, character, thought, diction, music, spectacle, Aristotle's Poetics. It's got to have spectacle and shock value. Right? Theater's a hammer, spectacle, shock value. As a young man, he says, why don't I restage the Columbia riots? On campus, and not tell anybody until it just happens. Now, if he did that today, people would be terrified. They'd think it was a terrorist attack. But he did it, and he got away with it, and it made his career. So this talks about his history with La Mama. And he got great reviews. He was a wonderful guy. At La Mama with Ellen Stewart, very famous theater, off-Broadway theater. And that's missing today. We really don't have any of that kind of excitement that we used to have. So you miss the people you know. And you mourn the things that you don't have anymore, but you are blessed with the things that were left behind. And anytime I see a cockroach, I think of George Ferenc. And I think, how can I kill that cockroach so it stays dead? I cannot have that face looking out from under his hat saying, it's not dead. Keep trying. I'm trying, George. It's dead. But he got his teeth fixed. And that was really the prime directive of the semester that I shared with him. And I asked him frequently, how's it going? He said, it's going really well. I'm getting a lot of stuff done. And he wasn't talking about theater. He was talking about his dental work. Well, we've had a very interesting day today. We talked about nose hairs. We talked about caffeine. It's still a little confusing, but I think I have a few more cups to go. We talked about the year 1968 and the haunting resemblances that we have to our lives today. And what's coming for us in 2028? I admit to being not fearful but concerned. Authoritarianism is on the rise in America. It's being aided and abetted by the same people, the same kind of people, who tried to form policy and restrict us in 1968. And the world blew up because of it. But can it happen again? Can the people take back their country? Can they take back their school? Or instead of sending in 1,000 police officers, will they send in 10,000 military people to go in and crush the spirit of those who want a different and better life? These are the questions that concern us. And if you know the past, if you know what happened, and the people who lost the past and who are still here and active today know exactly what they need to do in order to find success moving forward. And that is a great danger, I believe, to freedom of expression, free and fair elections, and the forward movement of a nation that tends to love repression and authoritarianism while crying for freedom in the same breath. It's really a fascinating conundrum that can also be just a little bit disappointing. So today, I invite you, if you have any thoughts about our conversation, to reach out to me on Twitter, @DavidBoles, Facebook, I'm Boles, Instagram, Boles Books. You can find this stream online now just by typing boles.live or boles.stream, and you'll be taken right to where you can watch us live every weekday. So until tomorrow, thank you so much for being here. And my final thought of the day is, kill the cockroach. Live your life like a hammer. Shock, change, it's all in your hands. And in your foot. Take care and be well.